You're probably wondering, who the heck is this guy? And in response to that, I'd say, who the heck are you?
Who are you talking to?
I come to you, I hail from the other side. I'm a property restoration contractor.
Mother of God.
Why, you might be asking yourself, would the organizers of this event believe that I have any value to offer this group of aspiring, intentional adjusters?
Why are you the way that you are?
I too as well agree. That is a good question. To introduce myself briefly, my name is Jon Isaacson. I'm also known, aka, as the Intentional Restorer. I'm an author and host of the DYOJO Podcast. I've been in leadership roles for construction, hazards abatement, and or property restoration for most of my professional life, which now spans over 2 decades. So I speak, I write, I coach through my organization, the DYOJO, the Do Your Own Job Dojo, helping the skilled trades to shorten their dang learning curve for personal and professional development. I recently published 2 books. The first one, Be Intentional Estimating, which addresses the mindset and habits for insurance claims estimating. And then the second one, Be Intentional Culture, which is a collaborative work which discusses how small things can enhance or undermine your efforts to build a strong workplace culture.
In the Be Intentional Culture book hug moment.
We got the hugger in the house. That's awesome.
As I said, I work from the other side. So I must be one of the bad guys. Well, since I am being paid so well to do this, I always have to give away at least a few of my industry secrets. How to go toe-to-toe with a contractor and win every time during insurance claims negotiations. Every time. The claims scoping and negotiation process has to be a fight, right? We train for this fight if we want to win. If one of us wins, i.e. the carrier or the contractor, then the other of us must be a loser, right? Loser! But for you, sitting in this virtual audience, as you launch your career, this is the same thing I encourage property restoration contractors as they launch their careers and their companies, is please be intentional about forming your own opinions and learning from every person and every experience. Some people will teach you very clearly what not to do, and others will teach you by their example what works. While we may be on opposite sides of a process, there are so many aspects of our roles that interchange and overlap. And so I feel, man, I've learned from so many adjusters over the years. If by chance you listen to the DYOJO podcast or look it up, you'll see we have adjusters, we have consultants on there, people that we try to learn from. So I figure, and I know our good friend Chris Stanley, who is key in putting this on, we've talked about on the podcast and behind the scenes about, helping what works well for both helps raise the bar, right? Elevate the process for all of us.
So which of you fine gentlemen would like to join our team?
I hope at the end of our time you will see that we have helped you shorten your dang learning curve in some aspect of your career trajectory. So I applaud you for taking on this industry. The opportunities are endless.
There's a lot of potential for aggressive expansion.
Before we discuss how to win insurance claims negotiation, for the fight, how to win the fight, let's prepare you first to get your face punched. On the off chance that you find this discussion helpful, if you want to read more or stay up to date, I do write an article, a monthly column for Restoration and Remediation magazine. It is geared towards restoration contractors, but I think there's items in there that would be of value to you as restorers. particularly my column. I believe the majority of our success relates to the development of our mindset and habits. While claims negotiation should not result in physical punches, there will be plenty of resistance from multiple parties as you continue to develop your skills in adjusting. So if you are going to be working with insurance claims, you are going to want to familiarize yourself with Xactimate. It's become the industry standard for the majority of the carriers and the third-party administrators. So if you are new to Xactimate, or are working to develop your skills, or perhaps you're a manager trying to help others, I think there's 3 things that are vital to anybody operating in Xactimate. And these are covered in my book if you want to purchase a copy of it on Amazon. But tip number 1 for intentional adjusters, you must learn from the first R. There's 3 R's. The first R, rejection.
Nothing for you.
You must learn from rejection. You are going to get rejected. It's part of the process. What you can do, though, it's especially in today's TPA-heavy environment, you've got multiple layers of review. So somebody's going to find something that is wrong or out of place or non-compliant with something you write in your estimate. If you've never done that before, please do not be alarmed. Do not get destroyed. Understand those of us that have been writing for 20 plus years, we're still getting rejected for stuff. So it's part of the process. Do not take it personal, and then try to learn from it from the standpoint of, keep a journal. Like, this carrier likes different organizations are going to have cheat sheets for you, hopefully. That's definitely something that Chris Stanley preaches. Every carrier has their general rules as well as their idiosyncrasies and their nuances. Resources that can help if you have internal review, or just even maybe from this conference or other types of networking events, you have people that you can, hey, I've never written this particular type of estimate before. You have. Could you just take a quick peek at this and see if I'm missing something? So almost ask for the rejections ahead of time. Just get a second set of eyes on your estimate. It can be a really good thing to help you learn from people, because someone may say, well, I typically write it this way when I'm working with that carrier and it hasn't been getting rejected. Oh, okay. Add that to the list, right? There are third-party services such as Ask Amy that can provide you with an instant feedback. They have general recommendations based on certain carriers, and just general tips and those kinds of things for items that are frequently missed. So tip number two for intentional adjusters, you must learn from the second R, which is repetition.
Don't ever do that again.
Xactimate is designed for the straightforward losses. You will learn this quickly that your average loss fits pretty well in Xactimate. There are going to be losses, obviously, that break with the norm, but think about where, especially water damage is the most prevalent, right? So you got kitchens, bathrooms, laundry rooms, right? Or hose bibs in areas that freeze, those kinds of things. For the majority of those losses, early on in my career, I did a lot of cut and paste. I still do a lot of cut and paste. But learned later, I actually learned later in my career, was encouraged to memorize line items, your most common line items. And myself and many of the people that I work with and have trained can write an estimate almost from memory, not having to always use the search line and those kinds of things in Xactimate. So that repetition, if you force yourself to memorize the line items that you frequently use, it can really expedite your ability to, whether you're writing your estimate on site or even taking your scope notes. You can write your scope notes in Xactimate terminology. So that way when you get back to wherever, maybe you're staying in a hotel, if you're doing a cat loss and you're crapping out your estimates, or, however your process works. Intentional adjusters must learn from repetition. and resources that can help you do that. Just develop a consistent approach to how you input data. So when I go to the loss, I take a picture of the front of the loss. I go to the source area, picture of the source, 4 corners of the room, top to bottom. And then when I'm taking my notes, I'm thinking in that same process, right? So just developing a consistent approach to how you capture the details of the loss. And then develop a reference database of information related to commonly questioned line items. Again, there's third-party resources. There's one in restoration that's very popular called Actionable Insights. They actually have a database of insight sheets, and monthly they send out the Xactimate updated line items and those kinds of things. So there's great resources that can help you stay up to date. Tip number 3 for intentional adjusters. The third R in the 3 R's is you must learn from relationships.
I once worked with a guy for 3 years and never learned his name. Best friend I ever had.
I would think of the 3 R's, this is the one you're already familiar with. You are here at this virtual event trying to get to know your local peers, partners, and vendors. And that having a network of people and engaging with people, keeping, take somebody's card. Maybe it's a contractor that specializes in a certain aspect, that going back to that rejection, you've got a unique loss and you want to understand how would you approach actually putting this structure back together. And those can be great resources. Maybe there's a vendor that can connect you with somebody, or tell you about a certain product or material or those kinds of things. And then your peers and partners, it's very important to grow your network of people that you can reach out to, that you trust, and that can be from all across the spectrum. If you can build your own network of people so that you're not always having to call your supervisor or the reviewers and those kinds of things, that can be helpful. It can help expand your ability to do your job. So intentional adjusters must learn from relationships. So you got rejection, repetition, relationships. So this is where we start to dive into the nature of the conversation about winning the negotiation process. I think it is very important. We were talking with Matthew Allen from Adjuster TV about this, where especially new adjusters or new contractors, when we're meeting with the client, let's set the right expectation early, often, and consistently, right? Our standard, our job as we approach this loss is to restore the property to pre-loss conditions, no more and no less. So,
Oh, go figure. Look at that. Oh, look at that.
so if you're a starting out independent adjuster, do yourself, your client, and the contractor a favor by making this standard very clear. And your introduction could be something like this. Mr. and Mrs. Homeowner, with the contractor present especially, would be great. My job is to perform thorough data capture on these site conditions so that I can accurately data input to generate an estimate for an agreed upon scope to restore your property to pre-loss conditions. No more, no less. So there's going to be obviously certain provisions or maybe exclusions in the policy that you're going to be privy to, or that may be brought out further down the line. But that's the standard. You contractor, you client, me adjuster, we are all part of this process where we want to thoroughly gather, data capture what's happened at this structure, and then we're going to accurately data input using Xactimate most of the time to build an estimate upon which we can have an agreed upon scope of work to restore your home to pre-loss conditions, no more and no less.
Whatever the things are not packed real
Right,
close
right, right,
together,
right.
There's still a lot of room to work with.
So contractors who understand this standard can be a great resource. Often, contractors may arrive at the site before you. If your company allows it, a contractor that will send you the ESX, in the companies I work for, that's what we typically do, especially now We're using tools like DocuSketch, where we can provide you with a 360-degree tour of the home, detailed photos, and an accurate ESX sketch that might help accelerate your process. Those can be really helpful resources. And I think vice versa, if an adjuster happens to be there first, and if they're able to share the ESX of at least the sketch, that helps both parties be more expedient in getting to an estimate that then we can discuss apples to apples, right? So while your company may not pay for tools like DocuSketch or Matterport, these three-dimensional data capture tools I think they're game changers, from the standpoint of efficiency, especially if you're out on cat loss or you're covering a large territory. The standpoint that you can scan a house, it's gathering all these details that maybe you didn't capture in your photos. I personally am most familiar with DocuSketch. That's the tool that myself and many of the companies I work with have chosen. We actually have a discount code. It's DS-DYOJO, DYOJO1. A $200 discount on the initial asset package related to that. So if you want to know more about that, please reach out. At episode 40 of the DYOJO podcast, we actually sat down with some contractors and an adjuster about their experiences with DocuSketch in particular. And so that might be helpful. To recap, again, before you get started in your process, you've got to learn from rejection, get some thicker skin. Do not take it personal when you get rejected. Then with that, memorizing your line items and documenting what you're getting rejected for, especially if it's fairly consistent. Initially, if you're getting rejected, that's just part of the process. If you keep getting rejected for the same things, that's not part of the process. That's you not learning from rejection. You're going to have to deal with it or find new ways. I think a lot of that is probably more on the contractor side, but I hear a lot of independent adjusters, have similar struggles. We have an article where we talk about it's actually Goldilocks and the three adjuster bears, but being professional, being polite, but not getting played, having the right approach to building professional relationships so that, you set the parameters. And again, that goes into, even as a young independent adjuster, you can set the expectation clearly and early, both with the client and the contractor, to say, hey, we are all on the same team as long as we are all trying to do the same thing, and here's the standard. We're going to restore this property to pre-loss conditions, no more or no less, with materials of like, kind, and quality, all the provisos. But so let's get into, again, we're trying to win, right? You want to win every time you have a confrontation, a meetup, a negotiation with the contractor. You want to win, and we're here to help you win.
A monster! And he will win through intimidation and forceful tactics if need be.
At the risk of being a traitor to my own industry on the property restoration contractor side. So what are some of these Xactimate best practices for success in claims estimating, you ask? And I'll say, I'm glad you asked. A lot of helpful YouTube videos, independent training, podcasts, books. What? Don't let fear prevent you from reaching out to someone through email. LinkedIn is a great resource, or just grabbing coffee. Please remember this, especially if you're starting out or if you're struggling. Most people, the process, the path to mastery is through trial and error. So if I've learned anything, this is definitely true in my life, it's usually from running my head into the wall, getting my teeth kicked in. Those are the lessons that stick when you're like, oh my goodness, how am I going to survive this? You'll survive it. Just keep doing, keep learning, keep adjusting, keep adapting. You'll see we have a scope diagram where the process of it goes from estimating to negotiating to producing. The producing part obviously primarily is for the contractor. But there can be times when you're called back into the process, maybe discovery of new damages or, some discussions or disputes over cost and additional scope that the contractor or client might be asking for. So the key elements that go into a scope are thorough data capture, and accurate data input. So if we cannot arrive at an agreed upon scope with the carrier, the contractor, the client, and then yourself, whether you're working directly for the carrier or as an independent, you're part of that process. So we go backwards. Was there something that we data input into Xactimate that was inaccurate or did not coincide with the details we provided in the data capture? That can be your photos. Again, I'm not trying to plug DocuSketch, but tools like that help you. If you can send, or if the contractor can send, a complete 360-degree walkthrough, that will help all of us be on the same page as we're looking at this, not just pictures. Pictures tell a picture's worth 1,000 words, so a DocuSketch or a video walkthrough even has got to be worth, 10,000, right? So those can really help, especially if somebody is remotely reviewing the file. So once we have an initial agreed upon scope, it then goes into negotiation, right? So you have the client communication leading to carrier communication, and that's primarily the contractor, but you as an independent adjuster, the same. Client, this is what we came up with. Carrier, this is what we came up with. And the client may have some questions, maybe something wasn't clear in the scope. The carrier may have questions or dispute certain things or note, hey, this is excluded, those kinds of things. So it might go through that process or go back into the data capture, data input. And then once the contractor has an agreed upon scope, now they're in the producing. So they've got to communicate with their client, get a contract signed, those kinds of things. There may be some change orders or things outside of the scope that they're working on. They've got to communicate to their production teams and execute. And then back to if there's supplements for additional discovery, that goes to the carrier, obviously, or if there's change orders for additional work, that goes to the client. This is on the screen. You can also look at this on our website, thedyojo.com/scope. We have some additional information on that I did out of this conversation. I thought that was helpful in producing, that maybe will help independent adjusters as well as contractors when we're having that conversation with the client. Hey, this is what we have to do. So establish the rules of the ring before you put your gloves on.
And you can count on me waiting for you in the parking lot.
A lot of people are jaded, and they're going to tell you, this can't be done, this is terrible, blah, 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 blah. You got to shut them out. And then there's a lot of people that have rose-colored glasses. Oh my gosh, this is going to be awesome, blah, 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 blah. You probably got to, kind of, those are nice things to hear, but you kind of got to phase those people out. And I feel like the people in the middle, Chris Stanley, Matthew Allen are two that I've really talked to that are part of your circle that are really helpful, in understanding, be aware of the pitfalls and the things that can go terrible, but don't allow those to jade you. And then be aware of, there's some people that have really made a good career and enjoy what they do and provide for their families and even have a little spending money on the side. So my opinion in regards to defining the ring for our inevitable fight is framed in this question: is there a standard that should govern all parties of the claim? So if you want to win,
I just want you to know I hate you. And so does my dad.
Hopefully understand, winning is relative, right? Like we all have a job to do, and I think you can really help yourself work better with contractors and clients, because understand it's not just contractors, but clients, whether they're intentionally or unintentionally, well, I heard this or I read this and that kind of thing. So you deal with a lot of different people, have different expectations of what is supposed to happen in this outcome. And so same thing for contractors, when you're talking to your client and talking to the carrier, again, our job is to try to get thorough data capture leading to accurate data input so that we can, arrive at an agreed upon scope to restore this property that has been damaged by a covered loss to pre-loss conditions consistent with the language of the policy, like kind and quality of materials, no more and no less, right? So use this. I would really encourage you, use this opening statement or some variation of it to try to set that expectation. Really, Xactimate is the software that we're putting the data into. And so a lot of times, like we said, if it's a common or a normal loss, it's going to fit pretty well, and there shouldn't be a whole lot of argument. That's relative, right? Lots of people can argue about lots of things. But if it's outside of the realm of the norm, there's some unique aspects to this loss. That's where, it's helpful to be creative with the contractor. Please provide. If you want me to input this properly, I need the data captured properly. So client, please tell us where you got this material, or these items, please help us do some of the research so that we can justify to the insurance company why X needs to happen, or this material is so much more expensive, those kinds of things. So if the data is there, we should be able to prove it. We should be able to present it in a way that that we can make it happen if it's, again, falls in line with that standard. A lot of people want to focus on the price, right? What's the price? And in some ways, as you get down the road, you will be able to see, okay, what's the overall scope of this loss? Okay, some photos, yeah, and then the price. And it either is like, okay, that makes sense, or maybe it makes you look a little closer. What's in the categories? What's leading that? Where's our recap by category is a great way to go through and give you a quick, okay, yeah, it's mostly flooring. Yep, this loss makes sense. Or, I thought it was mostly flooring, but why is drywall so high? Or something like that, right? And so you'll develop some of these shortcuts that help you understand, maybe a contractor is showing you an estimate that's significantly different than yours. And again, go back to, it's not personal, right? It's, what did I miss in the data capture? And that can happen. Maybe you got sent out before all of the mitigation was completed, right? All the removal was completed. Or maybe the contractor opened a wall and we found a whole lot more damage. Those kinds of things do happen. So go back. Now we're back through the process. We're back through the data input to the data capture, and we got to re-swing through. So having that framework really helps, again, I think, set your mind and your habits right. It helps communicate with the client and the contractor. This is how we're going to do this. So we want to clarify those responsibilities. There's a real fun character. We've had him on our podcast a few times. His name is Pete Consigli. He's called the Property Restoration Watchdog. Back in 2000, there was a publication called IE Connections. And he advised the following: it is critical following a loss that a process starts to have a meeting of the minds. I love that term. Among the three parties that are central to a disaster restoration project. These are the property owner, their insurance company, and the restoration contractor of record. So, if you have that mindset, this is a meeting of the minds. Go through. These are our responsibilities. This is what dictates and guides this process. And this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm expecting your contractor to do. This is what I'm expecting you to do. And so Pete coins this phrase. So again, you got the meeting of the minds and the restoration triangle. And he humorously summarized it as who's damaged, who's fixing it, and who's paying for it. And again, if you're an independent adjuster, you're kind of a unique middle person representing who's paying for it, right? And you have to do that in a way. I've seen plenty of independent adjusters. They may be a part of a process that they don't 100% agree with, and they say, look, I am here to do this because this is what your insurance company has requested of me. So, I'm limited to some degree by these outlines. But again, our goal as we work together is this. If your contractor and you will follow this standard, we'll get much quicker to an agreed upon scope so that work can begin. So, that's obviously a tip of tricky negotiations is finding what does each person want, right? The contractor wants a good scope so they can, be profitable in helping their client. The client wants to be made whole. And you say, I want both of those things. I want a good scope that you can, successfully complete and make money on. And I want you to be made whole. So here's the standard we follow. This is the process that's going to help us get there quicker. So if we work together, relationships, then it'll be a much smoother ride for all of us. So
What the hell are we doing here, Harry?
make sure, I just want to, I guess, make this in passing. I wrote an article on it. I'm not sure. In the Northwest, we had a claim, the Keodala claim. So you want to make sure that you're fighting the right fight during an insurance claims negotiation. But I always think, and I was taught early on, treat your files as though you may be going to court, right? So document in that way. Make sure your emails and those kinds of things are in such a way that you would not be afraid to have them be brought up in court, right? So make sure your texts and those kinds of things and your emails are in line. People do record conversations, so I would say if you're going to have some tricky conversations or those kinds of things, do those over the phone or in person. And then two, especially as contractors, I always encourage our teams, if you have a conversation with somebody, always follow up with an email. You want that documented, right? So that can't be brought up and used against you. But this Keodala claim back in 2019, mid-2019, I wrote an article in Restoration Remediation magazine, but it was talking about a insurance adjuster, an actual in-house adjuster for Allstate, that was being sued by the client for bad faith. Where Keodala was unique, and it's not unique in the sense that this has been brought up before, but I believe it was one of the cases that went the furthest, because initially the lower courts did deem that the insurance adjuster could be held accountable for the bad faith sequence from the insurance company. And the bigger picture, I think, there is be careful. We've seen many examples of that in insurance and beyond, where I was just doing my job is not justification for doing the wrong thing. So just as you develop your career, be aware and know what it means to do the right thing and the wrong thing. My purpose there is not scaring. The main focus of bringing that up is, it's always right to do the right thing. Document. So if you're being asked to do something that doesn't jive, bring that up with your supervisor. Document, right? I did this because this. I was told to do this by this person. I had this. Again, think about the worst case scenario. I don't think you should ever operate with fear of the worst case scenario, but with knowledge of, and you will get, in my professional experience, those claims where I got my teeth kicked in, or we just really set a bad expectation with the client, or really felt like we were raked over the coals by the carrier. Those instances educate my processes moving forward, because if I design our team and our process around what the worst that could happen, then hopefully we set the process up to more consistently achieve the best, right? So again, we're fighting, and we want to fight to win the right way, right? We don't want to cheat in the insurance claims negotiations. So going back to our graphic, again, that's available on the DYOJO.com/scope. I think it's important to recognize in that restoration triangle, right, the meeting of the minds, that each party holds some unique information in the insurance claims process as we're gathering the data and presenting it. So the insured, the who's damage, as Pete says, has unique perspectives on the pre-loss conditions and the extent of the loss, right? That they can bring to the table. And so if that's presented fairly and accurately, we want to take into account. And even if it's not being presented fairly and accurately, that's another instance where you want to document that. Homeowner advised, yada, yada, yada. Homeowner produced receipts for yada, yada, yada. The carrier, the who's paying for it, the representative, which oftentimes is yourself, has a unique perspective regarding the details of the policy and the responsibility of the carrier with regards to the source and the extent of damages, as well as any relevant exclusions. Those are important things, homeowner, you must understand the policy that you purchased excludes X. There's provisions for X. Maybe there's limitations to this area, those might be things like microbial growth or dry rot or etc. The contractor who's fixing it has obviously unique perspectives on the means, methods, and material costs that will be relevant to establishing an agreed upon scope. We want thorough data capture and accurate data input. So that data capture, every estimate needs two things. We cover this extensively in Be Intentional Estimating. The first two commandments of the book of this whole concept is we need the sketch. That's key to enabling the estimator to efficiently utilize Xactimate. The sketch unlocks, our quantification of linear footage, square footage, cubic footage, all those kinds of things. And then photo documentation. Photos are essential to justifying line items or excluding them, in the case that there's some kind of dispute. There is no substitute for actually being there on site and using all 5 of your senses, So as an independent adjuster, typically that's going to fall to you. Good documentation, use of the right technology, listening to and documenting what the client is telling you about the pre-loss conditions, listening and documenting what contractors or specialty vendors might be telling you about the processes they're going to implement to restore the property.
I warned you, but did you listen to me? Oh, no, you knew it all, didn't you? Oh,
we want to take pride in what we do. That is the whole nature of this book, Be Intentional Estimating. You can set yourself apart as an independent adjuster by taking pride in how you structure your estimates, by the quality of details you provide in your files, by the ability to set that standard and that expectation with the client and the contractor. The key things, the framework for success is doing it right, doing it efficiently, and doing it excellently. So these are a few things that I really feel strongly about. Poorly structured estimates show a lack of care and expertise. When your peers and people maybe that have been doing it a lot of times take these line items and just throw them against the wall like spaghetti and hope that they stick. I think that's just a terrible habit. It's very hard to set up a consistent system for yourself. It's very hard for other people to, there's flooring items here, here, and here, and there's paint items here, here, and here. It's all intermingled, as opposed to, like we talk about in the book, have a structure, prep items, walls and ceilings, and then work through as you begin to understand the work sequence. Write your estimate in a structured way. These structural habits not only help you stay on track as you go to the loss and you follow a process, a consistent process. It makes you more efficient. It makes you more thorough. You won't miss as many items, and then you'll communicate them better to the client, the contractor, and the carrier that you're reporting to. The contractor and the independent adjuster are similar in the sense that they may often find themselves as kind of middle people trying to communicate the story of this loss. There's a great author, Bill Wilson. He wrote a detailed and helpful book called When Words Collide by Bill Wilson. I think it should be read by anybody in claims. He outlines a structured approach to resolving insurance coverage and claims disputes, especially those doubtful and disputed. A good friend of ours, David Princeton.
You gotta do this. Getting all techie. Gotta hug the book.
We got the hugger in the house.
Who runs Advocate Claim Service. And I had the pleasure of first reading Bill's book and then sitting down with him on the podcast and discussing them in greater detail. It's really cool because a lot of these types of books can be about, winning that fight every time. And that's where I got the title. His initial presentations to insurance agents were how to go up against the insurance adjuster and win every time. He talks about trying to set standards, set expectations, use common terms so that we can reach a reasonable outcome. And so it's a great book. If you want an introduction to that, you can listen to that episode of the podcast. It'll give you kind of an idea of what we talked about in a breakdown. So all parties in the insurance claim should be clear about their responsibilities. In addition to the resources we've talked about already in this presentation, I did do a write-up. Some of the content that I wanted to cover doesn't quite fit into the timeline that we have. And so if you would like a PDF copy, a printout of the information, please email iz@thedyojo.com. You can use the promotion code IA-DYOJO, and we will send you a PDF of this presentation. So there's additional reading there and additional tools that you can, plus the references for the things that we've referred to, the references for the referrals for the references for the referrals. As you transition into the negotiating phase, we've taken the thorough data capture, we've done the accurate data input, we have an agreed upon scope, and so now we're trying to negotiate the final terms. Client communication needs to be clear and consistent. The carrier communication needs to be early and often. Again, if you're an independent adjuster, your role is very similar to the contractor in that we want to get ahead of, or we want to get in touch of whomever the assigned adjuster is from the carrier or their representative, so that we can, especially if there's things that are unique or outside of the norm, then we can communicate with them. We want to do it right, do it efficiently, do it excellently. We want to make sure we're following the standard, steer the conversation. When we define those professional relationships and the conditions for claims negotiation, I think that's where you can start to win, hopefully by taking away that element of, your client needs to somehow win, or the contractor needs to win, or that you're somehow thinking you need to win, by saying, hey, we're all here for the same goal. This is the goal. The standard is going to be the thorough data capture, accurate data input, so we can arrive at an agreed upon scope that accurately reflects what needs to be done to restore this property to pre-loss conditions with materials of like kind and quality.
You guys silly? I'm still gonna send it.
That's a mindset and a habit. We have to communicate. You have to be a good communicator. There's multiple stakeholders in every claim. Communicate, make sure that you're documenting everything that you can communicate. If you have an on-site or a phone conversation, make sure you follow that up with an email, note it in your file. If you want to go toe-to-toe with a contractor and win every time in an insurance claim, let's review.
This is it. I have to beat him.
You want to develop the right mindset and habits as an intentional adjuster. I invite you all to the Be Intentional tribe of the DYOJO way, insofar as we can be helpful to you. Learn from rejection, repetition, and relationships. You want to set yourself to where you're doing it right. That's, if you're just starting out, that's the focus. Learn how to do your job right. Learn how to understand the things that you're going to be adjusting and the policies that you're working with. Learn how to do it efficiently by setting up good habits from the start and then enhancing those, and then do it excellently. It is possible, even as an independent adjuster, to set yourself apart. I think personally, that's why one of the reasons I wrote the book, just that structure really helps you to be efficient, to make sure you're getting, thorough data capture, preparing you to be able to do accurate data input. But by having the structure that we talk about, you can even set that excellence mark, gold 5-star estimates, gold star estimates. And then in the phases, like we talk about in the scope, the DYOJO.com/scope, you, the client, the contractor, is there any dispute about the thoroughness of our data capture? I appreciate that on my end. A lot of times the adjusters we work with, please show me where we haven't properly communicated, this data input item, this scope item, in relationship to the data that we gathered at the site. The photos we provided, the DocuSketch, review we provided, and so that data capture leading to the thorough data capture, leading to the accurate data input is the foundation of our agreed upon scope. And then you have that phase 2 of the negotiating where you're actually, you've composed your scope. Maybe you're comparing scopes. Maybe you're having to communicate, hey, this is the way the carrier interpreted your This is the way the carrier interpreted your policy as it applies to these scopes of work. So again, as an independent adjuster, I'm relaying the information. If you, the client, dispute that, you're more than welcome to provide the data to the carrier and have that discussion. We do that a lot of times as contractors. I invite contractors at the same times. Some things are not your fight, so if the client really believes that something needs to be done that maybe you do or don't agree with, but understanding that they have a responsibility in the process as well. They are part of the triangle, the restoration triangle. They're part of the meeting of the minds. So client communication should be clear and consistent. Carrier communication should be early and often. And, I think these DYOJO best practices for professional relationships really come into play and can be helpful. So I wish you the best. Thank you for taking this virtual seminar breakout session course.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
If you want the PDF printout from this session, please email me, iz@thedyojo.com. Use the promo code IA-DYOJO. We'll send you the PDF and also a coupon code, which only works through our website if you want the 10% off on a signed copy with a sticker, as long as supplies last, because they will go quickly. And then, of course, it's always available on Amazon through Kindle and paperback. So thank you for listening. Please reach out if we can be of resource. You're connected with the right people. Chris Stanley is good people.
Every day is a struggle. Quit the bitch and you can give up or you can get lifted.
This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard.